You want to make a map for the Pokemon Kingdom, and you need to know where to start. Now, there is a lot of information I'm about to pack into this video about everything you need to know to make a Pokemon Kingdom map. So the TPK map engine runs on a custom map engine built by me. My name is Bosch, and this thing uses a JavaScript framework called Melon.js. So Melon.js is basically what Melon.js does is it's rendering what you see in the map on the screen. The map itself is actually created with a program called Tiled. Tiled is a open source map editor, and it's separate from Melon.js, but Melon.js allows me to render what is from Tiled onto the game. So the basically, like, the map itself is a separate file which anyone can work on independently of having it to be coded into the game. The map engine is designed to allow me to kind of pass that work out towards other people. And with minimal coding and effort on my part, new maps can be added into the game, like this new map right here, which came out yesterday as I record this video. So, if you're ready to get started, let's go on this journey together. So we're going to want to download the Tiled map editor. Download at itch.io. Or is it download, get the installer for Windows, or whatever. Scroll down. What? No thanks, take me to downloads. Download. Of course, I already have it, but it should be pretty easy to install. So as you're getting your Tiled set up, you're also going to want to create a maps folder. So the way this is going to work for while you're working on it is you're going to have a new folder, and inside the folder, you're going to have a folder called maps. And this is where all of the maps are going to go. And then you're going to have a folder called capital T tilesets. So if I've given you something that looks like this, you can go ahead and copy that into this tilesets folder. And now once you're in this maps folder, you can go ahead and make a new tiled file. Actually, we'll do that in the Tiled map editor. So new map. Now we're getting to some settings about the settings you need to have to create a new tiled map. The orientation, leave that as orthogonal. The layer format has to be CSV. You'll do that. Leave the render order alone. And map size has to be fixed. Tile size has to be 16 by 16. So I'll go ahead and change that. And I would recommend, if you don't really know what you're doing, just make a 50 by 50 map. This is very easy to change, and I'll show you how to do that in a second. So we'll click Save As, and then I'll head to that folder I just created. So the Maps folder, and you're going to want to call it the name of the map. The name of the map should be all lowercase, and if it has a space, use a dash. So we'll call this test-map. Alright, we're in now. I'm going to cover the general areas of Tiled before I move on to this, doing something specific. So this part on the right here, you're going to be looking here most often. Here are the layers. So maps are stacked in a series of layers. The layers at the bottom are rendered below everything else, and as you add more and more layers, whatever is on those layers are stacked on top. This is going to be more apparent later. Later. Not layer. Later. The next is the tile set section. So when we add tile sets, this is going to give you your canvas to select from. So it's going to give you like a grass tile, a rock, and that's what you're going to bring into this main area, which is your, I guess, like the map, the area you're working with. So on the left, I have my maps here. So you'll have access to your folder, I guess. I don't know how that works. And then the properties are another pretty important place. So most of this stuff you're not going to want to touch up here, but the map engine that I've written makes use of custom properties from Tiled, so we'll be going into that later as well. File's pretty easy, you know, save, export. Actually, you're really only going to be saving. We don't need to really do exports. Edit's pretty simple. So view, you may have to toggle some of this stuff. So you can turn the grid on if you want to, and this shows you each individual tile with a grid overlay. I prefer to have that off. And then for the views, you can also toggle some of this stuff on or off if you don't want it. This is the way I've configured it. I don't remember if that's default or not, so sorry, but this is where you can go if you don't have one of these panels. So map, we don't need map. Layer, we're not going to need that. I use this button right here. All right, so that is the general overview of tiled. So next I'm going to go into the tile sets. So if you open your tile sets folder, which I should have given you, put a new tile set in. I'm going to start with the font file. This is going to be super important later. So every map will need to have this font.png tile set. So we'll go ahead and drag that in to where it says new tile set. And then this box will come up. So you'll want to leave the name exactly as it is. The name needs to match the image file, where it's font and font.png. So those are the same. Make sure your tile width is 16 by 16. It may start with something different. Do not use transparent color. And the final thing is embedded map has to be checked. So if you have all of those things done, based on tile set image, leave that all in. Margin spacing should be 0. So if you've got all that, you can just hit OK, and it should import correctly. I'm going to go ahead and import another one. Which one should I do? How about the Lyrae Coast one? That's a nice one. So we'll drag that in, and it saved all my settings, so I'll click OK. You'll probably have like several tile sets when you're working with them, and you can just click here to switch between tile sets. You can also hold control and scroll to zoom in and out to see more of your tile set or less of it. And you can also drag this way. You can drag the panel if you want to see more as well. That's importing tile sets. Now I'm going to show you how to use your tile sets. So we'll just do some examples with the font. If you click on a tile, it will select it for a tile to use, and it'll be in your hand. So now it's just a matter of clicking and then, shall we say, giving the D to a map. You can also hold right-click. I guess your map has to be selected, and then you can hold right-click and drag to create a group selection. So if you wanted to do a lot of Ds at once, this is pretty simple. I'm using this all the time if I want to just make a little box and just boom, boom, boom. Right, I can do this, boom, 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 boom. And it's really easy to kind of paint in an entire area. If you want to get rid of stuff, you can go to the eraser tool and you can click and drag one by one, or you can also do the right-click box thing. So I'm just going to draw a giant box and it erases everything. Super convenient. Another thing we can do is also do a left-click drag to select a whole group of tiles. And then when I go to use my mouse, that group of tiles will be in my hand. So I can just bam, 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 bam. Super simple. I can even, once I've selected some more, make another box with the right-click hold. And just keep going like this to make a nice pattern. And back to, I hit E to switch to the eraser, and then bam, it's all gone. You can also use the fill tool to do the same thing. So if I select it again, the fill tool actually starts in the corner and then automatically configures your selected box to perfectly merge with everything else. So you can see that when I click, it actually puts everything in the perfect order. You can even do it less rectangular. So this random mode button is really cool as well. If you have a selection of a couple of tiles, like maybe you have, maybe we can do this here. Like if you have these flowers selected, these 6 flowers, you can click on this dice to select random mode. And as you click, it randomly selects from that tile set. And even if I do the fill tool, it just randomly fills in tiles, which is super interesting. And we've definitely used that to create a flower effect in an area. But make sure you unselect random mode when you're done, and then you can just paste normally. There's also some buttons up here. So these buttons allow you to rotate the tile you have currently selected. Unfortunately, this does not work in Melon.js at all. And the reason I'm telling you is because if you see these and you think to use them, the map will not work. So for example, if I take this corner and I wanted to flip it the other direction, I could hit this button and flip it and make it be like an upper corner. But even though this is working in tiled, like I said, it doesn't work in the map engine. These two, well, it won't crash, but these won't show up. They'll just be empty tiles. They'll be invalid tiles. So whenever you're doing it, just don't hit any of these. I know it's fun to spin around, but yeah, that does not work. So let's start looking at some layers. So this button right here is the new layer button. If we click it, we get access to a tile layer, an object layer, image layer. We're going to use tile and object for my purposes, and we'll start by making another tiled layer. So I'm going to call this layer grass, and then this layer, I'm just going to call it trees. So here's what I'm going to do. Going to select all of these tiles, hit the random button, hit the fill tool, and then bam, I just put in... Oh, wait, I was on the wrong tile set. No, okay, restart. So, yeah, I wasn't going to explain this yet, but the layer you have selected, and you can see it highlighted in blue, that's where the action that you're doing goes. So we want to select the grass layer, and then we can fill with random grass over the entire map area. And then trees, I can go ahead and select a tree. Hit the stamp tool. Get rid of the random. And I can plant some trees around. Cool. And then I can hold control and scroll wheel to zoom in so we can get a closer look. Okay, so now I've got some trees. Notice that the grass is actually underneath the tree, and that's what layers are doing. I can show you for an example what would happen if there were no layers. So this is where the tree is literally in the same layer as grass. The grass is not behind the tree whatsoever. So like, let's say you had some grass underneath here and then a tree on top. How would you know what's underneath the tree? Well, because like the layer is above that piece of grass I just put, you can't see it. So when you're working on maps, like for a situation like this where you've got an error, it's super helpful to be able to turn on and off layers. And that's what this eye symbol does. So I can click on the trees, click on the eye symbol, and the tree layer disappears. It's still there, it's just not showing right now. So I can go back to the grass layer and just kind of like fix it, and then turn the trees layer on and see it's fixed. Man, there's just so much to cover. Trying to do it one thing at a time. Another thing you should probably know is when you have a layer selected and you want to copy a tile that you've already used, you can right click on it to select that tile. So see right now I've got, let me actually put a different tile there. So I've got a grass tile selected, but if I want to select this other tile, I can right click on it in the map and it'll automatically select that tile for me. So I can use it again. And then if I want to put grass on, I right click on the grass. So there might come a time where you want to resize your map. Like let's say you want to add an expansion out towards the right here. You can go to map or resize map at any time and then extend the map in any direction. So I want to maybe make it be 100 length, which means I'm adding 20 new tiles. I can do that, hit OK. And then now I have all of these new tiles to work with out in this direction. It might not be obvious, though, how to add tiles upward, so I'm going to show you how to do that as well. So if I go to map and then resize map again, let's say I want to add 5 new tiles above the map. So I can, if I add 5 here, notice it adds to the bottom, but we can use the offset to get tiles on top. So let's just add 5 offset. And now you can see in the preview the extra new tiles are above the current map. So hit OK, and now I've got this space up here. Don't be scared about having your map be a certain size. You can always change it later. All right, so we know enough now to where I'm going to stop using our test map and just kind of show you maps that we have to explain some stuff. So this is probably the simplest map in the entire game. This is the Elite Four Champion section, and there are some new concepts we're going to cover now. First one is going to be tile info. If I turn on the tile info, you'll see that it's using this font file, and you'll see a bunch of ones, a bunch of zeros. So there is a chart for which character in font relates to how the map engine works. So right now you can see the ones are all tiles you cannot walk on. The zeros are tiles you can walk on. When I'm working on this, I like to use this opacity layer thing right here and turn the opacity down. So this is going to make the tile info transparent to where I can see the tile info, and I can also see the map behind it. So, zoom in a little bit. Now I click on the tile info to work with it, and I can just kind of say, well, you can't walk on these spaces. You can walk here, here, here. And this is how you go about creating what spaces you can walk on. For now, we'll hide it again, and then we're going to talk about the object layer. So in Tiled, the object layer is basically where we have either dynamic objects, things you can interact with. But for now, I just want you to know how to make a layer. So if you go here, you can click on object layer, and it will create a new object layer. Of course, I already have one, so I'll delete it. But once you've clicked on the object layer, you'll actually get a new set of controls. I actually don't even know how to make a new object. I think you do this box to make a new object, but honestly, what I do is I'm on this tool, and I go to another object from a different map. I hit Control C and V to paste it, and then move it around. So when you're moving an object around, it's very important that you hold Control while you're doing it. Right now, it's got a free range of motion, but when you hold Control, it snaps to the tiled grid, and that's what the map engine needs to work. So while you're moving it, just remember, if it's a little off, the map engine's going to be like, I don't know where this tile is. So you just have to hold Control and make sure you've got it aligned in the correct place. So like I said, we've got transports, a static object, this is an NPC, this is the main player. I will go over all of those later. We're going to look at Library Coast, and I'm going to tell you what every single tile info does. For now, we're going to ignore the other tile info layers. Just look at tile info 1. We're going to turn it on. And here is how everything works. As I said before, 0 tiles are walkable. 1 tiles are not walkable, so that's like a wall. A through Z, capital A through Z, are encounter tiles. So when you're designing your map, you have up to 26 different slots for where Pokemon can be encountered. There is a series of Pokemon for the A encounter slot. There's a series of Pokemon for the B encounter slot, the C encounter slot. You don't have to have all of them, but this allows you to have like a certain section where you can find this Pokemon and a certain section where you can find this other Pokemon. If I go ahead and scroll around, you can see this whole area is kind of like the A section. And then you get into the forest, and you're in the B section. So there's a whole bunch of Bs for the grass there. I can see the B aligns perfectly with all of the grass tiles. As we go up, 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 up. And then the forest section, there's some E's for an E section. The water tiles are 2 through 9. The game automatically assigns a surfing encounter slot and a fishing encounter slot. When you're making a water section, for each water section, you will have to have fishing and surfing for every number you have. Now, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, they all are surfing. You can even surf between them, because once you're in that, you are on water. So if I scroll up a little bit over to this section, you'll see this 3, the river over here is actually a different encounter slot. So there's different Pokemon you can encounter there. So the next thing you'll notice is that this bridge is actually on top of the layer order. The way I have solved being able to go underneath and over objects is through the use of tile info layers. So the one we've been looking at, tile info _1, which means it's the set of tile info below other areas. And you'll see the bridge tile layer is actually above tile info 1, which means when you're walking around tile info 1 and surfing, you'll go underneath the bridge. The bridge will be rendered on top of you. If I remove tile info 1 and add tile info 2, you'll see tile info 2 actually is above the bridge. And instead of being able to surf here, when you're on the second layer, you cannot surf onto the section. It's solid. This is a little complicated to look at, but if you just kind of think about it as like going up and down stairs, it does make some sense. So here, these triangle tiles, the downward facing triangles, are saying this is the staircase. This is a point where I can go to a different tile info layer. if I'm back on tile info 1, and you're walking here, these are all zeros, these are all walls. When you walk onto the staircase, from this layer, it's saying, hey, from now on, I'm able to transition to a different layer. If I look at tile info 2, the staircase is also stairs. So if you're coming from the tile info 2 layer direction, you can transition down into tile info 1. Once you're on the layer, though, and you're not on one of these tiles, you will continuously be on this layer. So that's how you get to Calum. From there, you can go up the bridge and then go up to this next layer, which is layer 3. Blah, blah, blah. You can go up to layer 4. Another thing to point out is just because you have a staircase doesn't mean you have to have a separate layer. So here, I didn't bother adding a layer 5, even though there could have been a staircase here, because it wasn't really necessary to do that. If you find that you don't need the layer functionality, you can use tile info 1 for everything, and it's not a problem. Yeah, another thing to point out, though, is that the more tile info layers you have, that can become a problem for the map engine. So I've kind of declared don't use more than 5. All right, the next tile info layer to cover is the ice layer. That's actually the Poké tile. And when you're on the when you step onto the Poké tile, it transitions you into that spinning ice mode. So when you step here, it'll send you down, 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 down until you encounter a non-ice tile. So that's how that works. The other tile to know is the crash tile. So that's this X, the X right here by the Poké. That gives you the crash glitch city thing. The last thing to do with layers and tile info is the idea of something you can walk underneath. This is one of my favorite parts about having the tile info system, is that this capital trees layer, I named it capital TREES because I was so excited about having the trees be above the player. So if I get rid of the trees, you can see there's actually zeros on tile info layer 1. And because this layer is placed above everything else, it will always render above the player. And you can do that for buildings, you can do that for trees. It is important to be kind of realistic about it. Like you could, do that for like everything, but like this tree, we're not really running under that kind of tree. We're running under this palm tree. Yeah, Starscream says, in principle, making the map is like photo editing and the numbers and letters decide the tile functionality. Yeah, that's right. So what it looks like doesn't actually matter for the game. The game is looking at these numbers. And here's your fun trivia fact of the day. If you didn't catch on to it, this is actually the Pokemon Red and Blue font file. This is all the characters that exist in that game. Which is why there's like PKMN and stuff. And the far-fetched apostrophe D. Alright, so now I'm going to explain the concept of a rooms file. So if you have a series of buildings, like in Delphinus, we've got the Professor Oak building, Magikarp statue building, and I don't know what this building is. There is no real, you can think of it as inside, but that's not really how the map works. The map works where you step into a transport tile and it teleports you to a new map. And the new map has a location which you can create. So what the convention we've come up with is to create a file called a rooms map file. And the rooms will contain the various insides to buildings or other kinds of tiny areas that you can walk into and leave. So this file has 3 building areas, and the transports basically say, come to this map at this location, and then enter this map at this location. This gives me a good opportunity to talk about map border. So the map engine works where your player will be centered on the screen, and it can see 8 tiles back and forth in all directions around you. So when you're making a rooms file like this is actually farther than it has to be, but that's okay. It just has to be at least 8 blocks distance from each other. And honestly, I recommend just going up to 9 or 10 just to be super sure. And if you have a little spillover in either direction, it's fine. 8's the absolute minimum, though. Same for the edges of the map. Ideally, you will have 8 to 10 blocks distance away from the edge. Otherwise, when the player moves up towards that corner, or that edge, he will not be center anymore. He'll be like sticking up against the side of the wall, and it definitely looks weird. In a regular map, this will be accomplished with a tree border or like a rock border or like cave walls, whereas in a rooms file, typically you'll just have a black screen behind everything else. Okay, so if you go under map and map properties, this is another set of things you're going to have to do for your map. So when you click on this plus, it allows you to add a property. And these are the 4 properties that maps have. So there's this encounter rate property, map ID, map music, Pokemon location. If your map does not have any Pokemon, leave out Pokemon location and encounter rate. If your map doesn't have music, leave out map music. But every map should have a map ID. So I'll go ahead and remove it for this one with the minus and add one to show you. So map underscore ID and then Delphinus square for Delphinus. We're going to be looking at that property section a lot because we're going to go into objects now. Objects all have, each type of object has a completely different set of object properties, and the object properties is what the game uses to determine what each object's special functionality is. The main player is a object that has to be present on every single map, and it has to have all of these properties. Basically, this is like the way Melon.js works. It had to work like this. So the name is main player, frame height, frame width, just leave that alone, hiddenly, yep, and start Z. So start Z, you might have to change. Z index of the tile info that you are starting at. Remember on Lyrae, we'll go back to Lyrae. There was 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's say you wanted to spawn in at Lyrae in front of Calum. So like here, you would actually have your main player object have a start Z of 2 because it's starting on tile info 2. Typically what I do is I go to another one of my maps, I copy it, and then I paste it in on this map. Click on the object layer, paste it in, and then I can hold control and move it where I want to, change the start Z to 2, and then there, I've moved the spawn point there. Remember, you can always delete objects. I think right-click, delete, remove object, or you can hit the delete key. So the next object I'm going to cover is the second most important object. And in fact, this object you will be doing a ton of for every single map. Even more important than the main player object, it's the transport object. Transport has 6 properties. First, I'm going to talk about the object class. Object class is present on every object except for the main player. Basically, it's telling the code what object this is. Pokemon object class is an NPC, technically. For the bird keeper, it's object class bird keeper. And for transport, object class transport. The Z property on its own is saying what Z level am I at. So objects, unlike tile info, does not have a set Z level. When you put a transport and you intend for the transport to act on tile info layer 1, you would need to set the Z to layer 1 as well. Map ID is the ID of the map you want to go. Remember, we set the ID in map properties, so map properties, the ID is Delphinus-square. And that ID also has to match the file name. Remember at the beginning I said file name has to be all lowercase with dashes. And then once you have the map ID and the correct Z level, it's just a matter of what location do you want to go to. I'm going to show you a nice little trick to get the location. So the idea is we were coming from Delphinus, we're walking in here, and then we come out this other end. So I want to end up right about here. If you look at the bottom corner, that actually has the current location that you're hovering over. So I'm going to hover over this tile, and it says 128, 122. Back to Delphinus, and I click on this, I'm actually warping to 128, 122. That's actually not a very typical warp, because there's a special thing I had to do there. Typically, it'll work like at this house, though. So this is going to map ID Delphinus rooms, and the position is 2549. So if I go to Delphinus rooms and find 2549, It's right here. The way map transports work best is if you warp on top of the transport tile that you're going to. Because right now there's a bug in the map engine where when you warp and then immediately step on another transport tile, it actually doesn't warp you again. So if you warp to a transport tile, you have to step off of it and get back on if you want to go back the other way. So that's the way I kind of work around that right now. Another thing is with these transport tiles, I typically have them be one step outside of the map. So you have to walk into the black to leave. That way, if you're walking sideways in a room like this, you wouldn't just teleport, because I feel like that's weird. You're also free to go to the same map that you're currently on. So like, let's say you wanted to warp from one section of a map to another section. Maybe there's like that Team Rocket teleport tile thing. You just have the map ID be the same map ID. The map engine is smart enough to realize that, hey, you're warping to the same map, so I'm not going to cause a map reload. It just warps you there.